And this happens sometimes with Zoom. There's a couple second delay. So for everybody listening, if we cut each other off or we talk at the same time, that's why. Because when I'm saying something, I don't think Dr. Alibek hears it for like 5 seconds. So we have a little bit of a weird delay. But it's good because we're going to be doing question and answers today. So a delay doesn't really matter. But I know you are on a time limit today. I've got you for 60 minutes. So we will try to get to it for everyone that hasn't listened. We've done 2 episodes already. And the first one was about Dr. Alibek's career and autism. The second one was exclusively about autism. And today we're going to go into some question and answers about autism for the average listener like myself. So with that, I know you're on a time limit, so I will start just right away with some of the questions. And so let's start with number 1. What is the official definition of autism or ASD?
To me, first of all, I'd like to say hi, hello to everybody who is going to listen to this podcast. It's a big honor just to talk about this. I mean, thank you very much for your time. Thanks.
Of course.
And to me, it's important because, you already told about this. My daughter is having autism. And of course, it took me many, many years to study it myself. And based on my medical background, looks like I found some interesting things we need to discuss and we need to share with our listeners. Mm-hmm. Several articles, and at some point I understood that whatever number of articles you publish, nobody's going to pay much attention. And because everybody who is working in the field is having his or her own project, agenda, and all things. And they would be focusing just on things they are doing. And in many cases, I'm not saying they're doing something wrong, because autism is such a complex, let me say, and multifaceted disorder. That's why, for example, whatever people do, they would find some appropriate area in which they would say, okay, it's a possible symptom, a possible cause, let me say, possible pathogenesis of this very complex, but at the same time, I would say very tragic disease. When I say tragic, I'm saying that all parents who are having autistic kids, they are having a completely different life. Life is not becoming normal now after they have a child with diagnosis. Everything is getting different. Parents are going to different places. Different, trying to use different treatments, different centers, and just many, many different things. And unfortunately, up to now, autism is considered incurable, or in some cases, even just untreatable. And, just in order not to repeat what I'm saying about what I said before, I'd like to tell about several things. The official definition of autism. Autism, according to some official definition, is it's a neurological disorder. It has 3 major areas where we, have diagnosis of autism or some other neurological disorder. First is language abilities. Just in this case, so-called verbal communication abilities. In all kids, they impair. The second area actually is the area of social communication, non-verbal communication. In this case, it's the second part. And the third part is restrictive and repetitive behavior. These 3 things are considered the major diagnostic criteria for diagnosing autism. Or now we call it ASD, autism spectrum disorder. At the same time, when we talk about this official definition, sometimes we can find some explanations, especially when we see it from some foundations, autism foundations, some from NIH, some other institutions, CDC. It said this, autism is a neurological disorder, and they repeat what kind of symptoms children usually have. And they say that it's etiology is unknown. We see some gene involvement, and we'll see some environmental factors. Okay, and that's it. And then when we start analyzing scientific publications, we'll say we're not talking about hundreds, we're talking about thousands, tens of thousands of publications. You'd be amazed how many different studies have been done and are being done currently to show what autism is. But to make a long story short, many things we have in autistic kids, they're missing, let me say, in many studies. We don't talk about much about many symptoms which relate to sensoric problems or sensory problems. Some motor problems. We see, changes in behavior. We see many things related to anger. Some situations which we would call hydroacusis or misophonia, and many other things. And just to be short, I would call it under this neurological description. There are so many different signs and symptoms of this condition. In this case, I would call it not a neurological, I would call it a systemic disorder, because we can see signs and symptoms and see pathogenesis from actually all fields, and we see changes in all organs. So only difference, let me say, some kids are showing one set of symptoms, some other kids will show some other symptoms. Some of them are overlapping, some of them are completely different. This is first. This is, from this point, autism is absolutely unique. There is no single disorder or I would say disease which would have such a huge number of different symptoms, clinical manifestations, so many different things which would be considered etiologic factors or factors of pathogenesis. That's why I would call it a systemic disease, which actually is not just neurological. It has some endocrine symptoms from the endocrine system, from nervous system, from the immune system. And I would call it, let me say, this is a disorder of, I wouldn't say destroyed, but I would say imbalanced homeostasis in all organs, systems, and even cells of the body.
Could you say that the only thing, it's unique, it's comparable to cancer in that cancer is a very large umbrella term for something that can affect every part of the body in different ways with different stages and different states of, metastasis. Is it similar to that? No?
There is some similarity, but from a different point.
Okay.
First, when we say cancer, actually, it's everybody thinks, okay, cancer is a tumor. But cancer is not a tumor itself. I would call it a neoplastic disease. It means cancer is just kind of a culmination, let me say, of a certain condition, for example, which started many years ago, and finally having a specific tumor in one another organ from one another tissue. In terms of autism, we are talking about something different, but with many different, with many similarities. Autism is a condition which is not affecting just specific nerves or brain. It's, let me say, it's a disorder of everything.
Okay.
Just describe it. But in terms of stars and when it starts, let me say, it's a completely different story. It should be discussed, let me say, in great detail.
Okay. Now, so the second major question is you said, is there something missing with autism? Is it a lack? Is it an absence of something, an absence of a gene or a metabolic process or something? Or as just said with cancer, cancer is more of a something gone rogue in the actual like replication process.
And you know, Tommy, you can imagine let me say, in our cells we have, in each tissue, we have DNA. I mean, the DNA actually is practically, the same. But the problem is what kind of changes are taking place in one another, cell or another organ. It's a completely different story. When we talk about this particular condition, what we have missing, I wouldn't even say missing. I would say many things are pretty well known. And if, for example, we read articles from different institutions, and many actually universities, very famous, let me say, very prominent universities, they have their own autism initiatives. They do many things in terms of trying to understand what kind of damage to the brain, in case of autism, what kind of changes, what kind of neurotransmitters, and many things. The research actually is practically everywhere. The only things which has not been done, let me say, try a kind of institution, let me say, or group of good physicians from different fields and different institutions trying to collect all, let me say, just different studies. And as soon as we collect it, let me say, and build a kind of, I would say, a logical description of autism, you'd be amazed how many is already known, but for some reason it has not been used, let me say, for actual treatments.
Yeah.
This is the most difficult things for me to understand. For me to understand. You know, it's what I'm saying, because if somebody wants to know, or some institution wants to know about autism, this institution should collect all the information available, and do a good analytical study, and, for example, to put all these dots together and connect these dots. And specifically, this type of study would require, people who are studying in biology, people who are studying neonatology, then studying brain development, specific from, let me say, from a moment of being an embryo, to, let me say, to formation of fetus, let me say, and to a child to be born. And we need to know, we need to have the knowledge of immunologists, neurologists in different fields, molecular biologists, geneticists, and then physiologists, brain physiologists, let me say, and general physiologists, endocrinologists, gastroenterologists, hepatologists, and all things, let me say, just many things have been already published. And but people are trying to go deeper in each field. But but the information which is already available, if somebody does this work and somebody funds, let me say, huge projects, and okay, guys, would you get together and just based, let me say, on your particular knowledge, you get into the same room for a month, for a year, for example, and start connecting dots, because many things which are happening, they're happening on the border between different sciences, medical sciences. This is the case. And as soon as this work is done, we say it's absolutely possible at this point to build a model of autism. And this model would show us where we have, let me say, the places when we need to have interventions. And first, not to let it appear, not to let it develop, just after being born, let me say, and stop at a certain point of child development. Or even in some cases, treating some people who are already adults. This is the case. This is missing. Because it's a multifaceted, multi-science, let me say, multi-medical field. Disease, and the only things we can do together. Combining all this knowledge, let me say, and it's, believe me, maybe it's not a good word, believe me, because it's, being a scientist, you shouldn't use this term. And collect this information, build a very great database, let me say, put together, kind of. Maybe at this point it's necessary just to do some information technology people, because all this knowledge, all those are very, very, known and connectable. In this case, just as soon as we do this, and actually this is what I use, of course, I'm alone. I have no, support from anybody. Everything I do, I'm treating kids, being a physician in these countries where I'm licensed. In this case, I see the results. It's even with my limited big, because for a single person to connect all dots, let me say, it's a big problem. Even with this situation, I can say, okay, guys, even a month, I can give you first results. Of treatment. This is it.
Would you be able to, if you had more resources, is that something where you think you could make a more profound impact on autism? Is it a manpower limitation? Is it a money limitation? Is it a time limitation? Or is it all of the above?
I would say, there are many factors. But what in many different fields of medicine, what I notice, sometimes, let me put this way, of course, it's without blaming anybody. Many physicians are becoming, kind of representatives of big pharma. What they do, and I know how it works. For example, there was even some study to analyze how a physician will start prescribing one or another medication after getting to a conference, someplace, in the Caribbean, for example, days, with the family, and listening to some description of a new medication, and this new medication is getting treatment. And the physician even wouldn't notice that he or she is prescribing more medication after this kind of event. This is just one of hundreds of different stories. Just because conflict of interest actually is a big deal, and we need to admit it. This is a big problem. I would say, according to some publications, 70, 80, even 90% scientists, they have conflict, even they don't mention it. They don't mention it. This is the case. In this case, when we talk about this, it's a matter of even not money, because I'm not asking for money. I'm asking just, for example, if I had the chance to have a medical center who would say, okay, guys, we understand, what you say, and we give you a chance to present everything with the results of the actual treatments, because it's not study, it's not a study, it's not a clinical trial, because I'm not treating autism per se, I'm treating underlying conditions. And for all these conditions, we have already everything which is already approved by FDA, and we can use them easily. In this case, to have 100, 200, 300, 500, 1,000, children, and funding from this institution just for these children, and to, regular clinical trial, or not even clinical trial, we can have just regular treatment. Without treating the actual autism, we would treat underlying conditions and we'd see what kind of results we're having. If after 2-3 months of treatment, kids, they all lose sensory problems, they start getting interested in some other kids, some peers, these type of things. Kids who didn't speak, start trying to speak first words, very simple. Then in 3-4 months, they will try to connect simple words into simple sentences, and then, for example, we start moving ahead, and this involvement of therapists, rehabilitation people would be especially important at this point, because they start healing now, they start feeling now, they start seeing now, they start doing what they were not able to do before. In this case, these kids, I'm getting this. Remember, I told you about how many email texts I'm getting from parents every day, hundreds. Just for some details, just at night, consulting some parents. It's It's already, look like I told you, it's already a few thousand kids already. And each kid would require about 5 to 10 consultations. It means I'm already had about 10 or 15,000 consultations. And you can imagine how many kids I saw, how many things we use for treatment, because everything is pretty well known. In this case, what is necessary, in my opinion, is we need to have somebody who is not, I would say, prejudged, who is not, for example, who is having an open vision, who is not talking about his or her very narrow field of interest, because that's what we have. I'm sorry to say this, even the best universities. They do great research. But if research is going and they feel saying, okay, we know that this neurotransmitter is overexpressed and this is suppressed, it's great research. But they all know, okay, they make, let me say, some progress. But if we go this way, even in 20, 30, 50 years, we wouldn't be able to find solutions. That's the problem.
Do you think that
before everything is so simple? I mean, I cannot comprehend why people don't try to do it.
You think that you could? You think that if you had a medical center, to show a wide enough trial with a large enough sample size, that you could, if by doing that, because like you said, it's off-the-shelf medications. You don't need some expensive billion-dollar 3-phase clinical trial. You don't need any of that. You need the time and space to prove yourself. It's a science fair, and you got to show your findings. If I'm understanding you.
Then this a little different way. Even some people say, okay, it's the wrong way to do it, but to me it's a principle. To me it's not to prove my approach or something like this. It's my understanding, having a daughter with autism. It's my understanding what parents are going through. This is just people who are not familiar with this. I mean, they cannot even imagine what's happening to the parents. I mean, just years and years, let me say, of tragic life. It's just where in the family everybody suffering. In this case, and what is, without blaming anybody, of course, I'm not in a position to blame, but but when we see so many scientists, so many billions of funding, let me say, to different universities, foundations, and sometimes I think, okay, whether these people have seen, let's say, real autism, will they talk about something different? It's a little bit not very close to real autism. But real autism is completely different because they talk about some pathways, they talk about some molecular changes, they talk about, neurotransmitter differences, they talk about neural dislocation. Everything's correct. But it's a part of story. It is a kind of resultant thing, let me say, from completely different trigger. This is what people need. And I'm not saying about just on my behalf in this particular case. I'm talking about for hundreds of scientists who have already published a number of articles explaining how it starts. This is the biggest tragedy in this case. It's always happening in science. You remember last time I told you. Because when people are thinking about just within their own, kind of pattern of interest, I would say, they would never accept any other view. If you put together somebody who is a neurologist, he or she is studying some specific neurons, for example, mirror neurons, and they would be studying this and happy, getting funding, they would say life is good. Somebody in the same field would be studying the connectivity of neurons. he or she would be great because what they do is absolutely correct. But just if we start analyzing all these pieces, we would find not hundreds, thousands of differences, say, in metabolic pathway, in genes expression or suppression, or we discuss whether it's genetic disease or epigenetic disease. Yes, I can give you an example. A recent study involving about 18,000 children, and a group has done, let me say, some analysis of gene expression or suppression, let's say some kind of genetic changes. What they found out, about 1,000 genes are changed. 1,000. But when they tried, let me say, just to compare them, they found just 5 which would have more or less statistical, I would say, didn't have statistical error. It means even just in this case, we are not talking about 100% case that these genes are obligatory for autism. Just in these cases, whatever research you take a look, you would see, many differences. The only thing which is, in my opinion, when we talk about this, maybe I'm using something which is not clear to our listeners. Just we talk about what's happening to the genes, whether it's a genetic disease or it's epigenetic disease. There is a new term, relevant term called epigenetic. Epigenetic doesn't mean, for example, the disease is inherited. That's why, let me say, all these previous, statements about genetic disease, actually, they're not correct at this point of time. We talk about genes, some genes involved in this disease. But why nobody would think about this when we talk about cancer? We know genes are involved. Infectious disease, acute infections, genes are involved. We talk about liver disease, genes are involved, and so on and so forth. But we don't argue that all our diseases we have, even just cold or flu, is genetic. Because in all cases we have is overexpression or suppression of genes. But if you go this way, guys, I'm saying that just all diseases. Even put my hands up and down. Okay, my genes start acting. Some genes express, at that moment. But doesn't mean, for example, just because everything we do is based, let me say, on the changes in our genes.
Yeah.
It's clear.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Because coming back to this, yes, if we had not just me, just people who are thinking this way, physicians, thinking this way, and having, just a few people, this is provable easily. Even just if there was interest, again, what I'd like to say, it's not a matter of money for me, because my CEO of our company, we discussed in the left committee, we discussed these things together. And the only thing we came together, just in terms of opinion, that for us, it cannot be business under any circumstances. Just because it's our obligation, let me say, as people, do something to help other families. In this case, the only things would be required because we're having our salaries. We will do some other work unrelated to autism. And for us, let me say, just to find somebody who would say, okay, guys, somebody needs to do something. That's the case. Otherwise, just the number of families having autism is dramatically increasing. We're going to see a big difference after this COVID. Moms who got COVID infection in the first trimester, in the beginning of second trimester, would be given, not all of them, but many of them would be given birth to kids having autism or having cerebral palsy. That's what we're going to face. Because we know now a number of publications talking about herpes viruses, herpes 1 and 2, talking about cytomegalovirus virus, congenital rubella virus, Zika virus, then Lyme disease as a bacterium, mycoplasma, just because a number of infectious agents which are playing a role, let's say, in a possible development of autism, this number, let me say, is growing. But do we hear anything about this? I mean, this NIH, without blaming anybody. I mean, again, at NIH we have two great institutions. I mean, there are many, but for example, it's the Institute of Mental Health, National Institute of Mental Health. Mm-hmm. They study autism. They do great study, no questionable. But they are focused on neurological things. Mm-hmm. Take a look at the Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. And I was going through the list of research. Zero studies on, a possible role of chronic infection and inflammation, let's say, in autism development. Zero. This is how we're going to solve the problem, let me say. The major institutions of the country have no, there's no idea that it should be done by them.
Do you think that, sorry, I know there's a delay, so sorry for interrupting. Do you think that the very thing you're saying, that money is not an issue, do you think that is why this isn't getting attention? Because there's not a killing to be made? I mean, we know, right, with the Sackler family and OxyContin, we know that they would fly doctors out to their conferences, like you were saying. They would go visit them and be like, hey, the doctors would get, free cruises and free airfare and hotel and, platinum cards, and just make sure you prescribe some OxyContin. We know the Sackler family did that. There's a great book called Pharma by Gerald Posner all about it. We know that that is an incentive. We know that Pfizer had to pay the biggest fine in FDA history, a $2.3 billion fine in 2009 for skewing clinical trials and censoring results. We know that that is a thing that has happened in the past, and it's probably happening right now, and will probably happen long after you and I are gone. It's just the human condition. Could that very thing be the fact that money is not a factor in this? Do you think that the dark truth could be that that's maybe, it's not that it's being suppressed so much as these companies are, they're private corporations. Are they looking at it and they're looking at Dr. Ken Alibek and they're going, oh, it's all off the shelf treatment. There's no money to be made. Could that be the sad truth?
Tommy, what you said, I didn't mean to say this, but you asked the question and I will definitely answer it. Being in the field of pharmaceutical development, in the field of biopharmaceuticals, bioproducts, it's not a big secret to anybody, because as soon as a new company is getting approval from FDA, they will start getting big bucks, explaining that they spend so much money and that they'll be selling some product for very big bucks, big bucks. But the problem is, in many cases, many things. I can give you just a simple example. I don't remember the drug we're talking about. Either it's Janomet or Juneria. Two drugs, let me say, for diabetes. And the cost, I don't remember how much it would cost now, but it was about 20 years ago. It was a month treatment would cost about $800 after. Looks like $500 or $800 after insurance pays the rest. But this one of these drugs, it's just a combination of two drugs, very old drugs. This is metformin, let me say, and looks like it's glycazide or Biopreparat, combined together into one. But if you take a look at metformin and Biopreparat, you would pay about $30 a month. In case of this, you would pay $800. And a recent story, maybe it's still developing. It's so interesting to me because I'm using an still sustain, a very good anti-inflammatory supplement.
Yeah, TPC.
Autism. But do you know what's happening now? as soon as people started getting more knowledge about N-acetylcysteine, FDA published a warning that nobody can use it because it will be some company found the way to use N-acetylcysteine to treat some condition. Now it's becoming drug. Just if we paid, let me say, for 100 pills, for example, we paid $20. Now we'll be paying for this, we'll be paying $2,000.
Jesus.
This is the case. I know my wife told me just don't try to play money for people. Sometimes I cannot understand this, because for autism, we don't need anything new. Absolutely. That's what I'm saying, guys. Every drug is already available. All supplements are already available. Just guys take it from a shelf and start using it, period. And that's why you would never get, any funding, from a pharma company. You would never get interested in any big institution or university because they have their own funding, millions of dollars from different places, especially parents who are having autistic kids being reached, they would pay big bucks. And I've known for so many institutions. But when I say, okay, guys, for treatment, it's easy. Use this and this and this. 1 month, next month you use this, and in 2 months you'll see first results. Okay, guys. and any discussion I'm having would stop at this point, saying, okay, let's get together and never appear again.
Maybe you should combine the drugs and create your own drug, and you could call it like Alibek, but then you make the patent free.
Already patented it and said, okay, guys, it's for free use. I'm publishing all this information on my Facebook because my patients are. Because my diploma is Soviet Union diploma. It's working with me for 15 countries also, the former Soviet Union. I published everything in Russian. I'm saying, okay, this is first, this is second, third. I'm giving webinars in Russian. I'm explaining, situations, one or another thing should be used. And just a number of people doing this. So the only problem, as usual, I'm having because now so many physicians in those countries, they're saying they work with me and they know this treatment, then they start charging me bucks. I'm saying, guys, don't believe it because I'm not charging you any pain.
Yeah, it seems like this is a case of maybe you just have to keep doing what you know works, and eventually the results will speak for themselves and it will come out, right? Eventually you'll learn, people will learn that. It's like working out, right? Like I work out every day. Eventually you learn when you work out, you don't need $10,000 of supplements. You don't need a personal trainer. Go get some dumbbells, go on YouTube, find a regimen, eat some eggs, drink some milk, stay away from candy, get some sleep, take a multivitamin, and that's about it. Stay hydrated. Eventually the truth speaks for itself. So this might be, unfortunately, it might be a case where you just have to keep doing what you're doing and the results will speak for themselves. It might take a year, it might take 30 years, but perhaps that's the case.
Already 13 or 14 years, this is. But again, I cannot say 13 years ago or 14 years ago, I knew what I know now.
Yeah.
Because things this. It's days and nights of reading, analyzing, to get some information. After attempting to publish articles, I realized, okay, well, my articles are among hundreds of thousands of others. Period. In this case, and I thought, okay, what's more important to me? Just to be recognized as somebody, as in terms of scientific studies, or I need to help as many as possible people. And I thought the second thing would be much more important. But at the same time, what is disturbing or even troubling to me being a father and of a daughter with autism, who's much better nowadays, but just the treatment was established a few years ago. Before it was, everything absolutely unknown. And I can imagine how many parents are suffering now. And I'm ready to share this knowledge. Just when some people here in the United States are coming to me, I'm saying, guys, I'm sorry, but I have no license. I cannot treat, but I can give you a recommendation. And you go to your physician and, for example, explain everything. And if your physician, let's say, is, smart enough, let me say, or having good understanding, or understands logic, in this case, you wouldn't have a problem. But so far, 1 of 10 or 1 of 20 would say, yes, there is logic. Okay, let's try this. Others would say, no, just we're not going to.
You spoke last time about someone that I like, Joseph Lister, right? And how there's a great book called The Butchering Art by Lindsay Fitzharris, which goes all into the history of Joseph Lister. And what he did, it was like, hey, I think we should be like disinfecting our tools, right? I think we should be cleaning the area of operation. I think we should be, and people laughed at him. They said he was a quack. They said he was crazy. But eventually, you can't hide the truth. When his patients started surviving, when the average survival rate was 5% and his survival rate was 75%, eventually and for him, it took like 50 years, but eventually if the effects are real, like the earth revolving around the sun, or the earth being round. Eventually, despite the best efforts of people who want to keep their head in the sand, eventually you cannot hide the truth, especially with science. It does, when it's a natural thing, when it's the laws of medicine or physics or whatever, eventually it will come out and it cannot be hidden. So, and then I know that's kind of like a cheap answer, but history is on your side, Dr. Alibek. If you show this works, it maybe not in our lifetimes. Maybe we won't see it. Maybe it will. Maybe I'm optimistic, but maybe it won't. It will eventually come out.
Yeah, to me, it's interesting to me from a different point. There is no necessity for me to wait, for many years. I'm not young, but
Nonsense.
I see...
Nonsense. You look great.
I see all the cases. And once I asked all moms, because all are on treatment, all went through treatment, would you be interested to disclose your names, your kids, and just, because it's not a clinical trial. They say yes. And sometimes they say, okay, without my name. Some even parents say, okay, just if you want to videotape it, of course you do it. But again, it's a medical ethics. I cannot do this. But if somebody is interested, just it's possible to show all this. And especially, just this type of things, let me say, is not patentable. From this point, it's patentable. But there are some things, for example, you cannot make money for. Okay, this is because this is a tragedy. It's a huge epidemic now. In this case, to help all these parents, to help all these children, it's a physician's obligation. That's why I'm thinking not about something. I'm doing what I can do now. It's how much and how long. How many kids would survive? Because some of them are getting normal neurotypical, and they are moving. Others are moving towards. It's quite a long, treatment. It would take about from 6 to 12 months, but at the same time, there is nothing dangerous in this treatment. Just because all things are having either approved by FDA for certain conditions, and we are not even talking about off-label treatment. We talk about infection. What would you use for infections, correct? We talk about viral infections. We know what should be used. We talk about SIBA, C4, and EMO. We know how it can be treated even. And we know what kind of things would work for these conditions. And if we have inflammation, let me say some other things, of course, we know how it can be treated. Some people say, okay, guys, we have some change in the brain. But we shouldn't forget, and people who are studying neurobiology of brain, they know what neuroplasticity is and neurogenesis is. It means, for example, brain is still developing after we are 20, 25 years old. It can rebuild itself. In this case, there is no necessity for us to intervene, let me say, after we start treatment, maybe just to support if there is some overproduction of some neurotransmitter or some other things. Of course, we know what it means, for example, but it should be done after we take away inflammation, take away immune system damage, take away all the things which keep this kids, let me say, from getting better. That's it. And in this case, I'm optimistic from the point that the United States, Great Britain, the most conservative countries. And in my opinion, some bad story happened to us in the 60s, actually, is so-called evidence-based medicine. Not because it took away medical reasoning, critical reasoning from us. In this case, a balance of two things, evidence-based and critical reasoning for physicians, two things which come together. As soon as we understand this and start applying evidence-based, let me say, with critical thinking, everything will become different.
First of all, you look very young, so I don't want to hear you say I'm not young. You look fantastic. I've got you for 13 more minutes, so let's jump to the next question. We still have a lot of questions. We'll have to do another one after this. What are the major studies in the field of autism, and is it a genetic disorder? And if not, what is it? But I feel like we've kind of touched on those already.
A lot of studies have been done by different institutions to study what kind of genes are involved in autism development. A number of genes which are either suppressed, let me say, or expressed, let me say, is very large. Let me say, and from study to study, you will see, let me say, different spectrums. And in this case, but at the same time, there are some genes you would see which would be either responsible for some proteins in the immune system, then some other things, for neurotransmitter production and so on and so forth. Some of them structural, for structural things, for functional. In this case, this type of, from this point, it's a genetic disease. But the question is whether it's inherited or not. This is a big thing. And nobody was able to prove that there is a single gene or set of genes would be absolutely typical for autism. It means from this point, it's not genetic. But, okay, what kind of explanation? In this case, we're talking, there are many other things. Mutilation, let me say, kind of doubling, gene doubling, so on and so forth. And it's clear that it's a matter of epigenetics. Epigenetics, it means, for example, when it's not a matter of DNA itself, it's a matter of some things which actually is not a sequence of genes. It's mutilation, for DNA mutilation, for example, it's epigenetics, and the mutilation play a role. And it usually happens when we talk about some other factors involved. In this case, which we call environmental. But what kind of environmental factor? Some people say heavy metal, some people say so and so and so. But in just whatever you do, finally we come to the single thing. Inflammation. Inflammation and oxidative stress. They are attacking our genes. But where this inflammation is coming from? It comes, let's say, from intoxication, for example, heavy metal intoxication. But at the same time, in the biggest number of cases, it would be either bacterial or viral fungal or misinfection, they are inducing chronic inflammation. And from this point, I would add something in terms of treatment. And I'm always saying, okay, guys, if you have this situation, and we have a kind of constant, let's say, pressure on our genome, and factors which are playing a role, let me say, quite well known. What would you use for, let me say? Some people say, okay, we need to use anti-inflammatory medications. But okay, you can use them, but you still have, let me say, this infection, the chronic form. And in this case, they say, okay, maybe some of them, we need to use some short-term antibiotic treatment. I'm saying, okay, guys, 7 days, 14 days, 3 years. But do you know that these short-term treatments actually result in a huge number of chronic bacterial infections? This is, let me say, our approach. We did it ourselves. Notice when it was said, okay, you can take these antibiotics or something for 3 days, 5 days, and so on and so forth, what you do? You create antibiotic resistance. This is big because the bacteria which are able to survive short-term, they're becoming resistant, let me say, to longer treatments. That's what we have. In this case, when, okay, it's not genetic, it's epigenetic. And it's obvious we have some factors which are involved let me say, in inducing inflammatory condition and oxidative stress. Some people say, okay, how about other steps? What's happening afterwards? As soon as we have, let me say, these changes, I mean, yes, of course, because we're dealing with a developing brain, because all the things are taking place, let me say, in the period, let me say, of when a child is still in a womb. It's informal, it's a fetus. In this case, when they have, let me say, constant pressure from this, let me say, the brain is developing differently. And again, the study is available. Just guys, I'm saying, open this. Many publications about inflammation in the brain. Many publications saying the brain size is bigger, so-called, we call it proliferative inflammation, productive inflammation. I mean, we see, for example, how some areas of the brain have, let me see, a bigger number of neurons, some areas, smaller number of neurons. And for each child, these areas are different, or concentrations are different. That's why some people say they have specific, talents, because the connectivity is higher in certain area. Even this area, let me say, is responsible for creativity. That's what we see. But at the same time, people say, okay, it's great, it's autism. But then I'm saying, okay, guys, take a look, let me say, at other things. How this child is suffering. And if somebody is having this, very serious connectivity in certain area, we can get, let me say, problems with sensory systems. That's what's happening. Again, that's what I said before. This research is taking place. And guys, it's clear if you have such a big number of different symptoms and inflammation in different fields, difference in connectivity, whatever article you read, you would see some difference in connectivity. That's what, in this case, there is no specific pattern. Okay, we have this all the time. But there is one pattern we have, the only one, is inflammation. The only thing which can cause problems in developing brain is inflammation. Some people say it's, I'm sorry for using a specific term, microglia activation. But microglia activation and neural inflammation, same things with some small difference. And it looks like microglia activation, let me say, actually is kind of confusing people. Because microglia activation is the result, let me say, in the production of some pro-inflammatory cytokines and some pleiotropic cytokines. Pro-inflammation is doing the same things. In this case, just saying, guys, let's remove microglia activation. It's a small part of neuroinflammation. There are many other things. And let's say openly, guys, it's neuroinflammation, it's oxidative stress, they are attacking our genes. Let me say the genes are, some of them are expressed, some of them suppressed, and we see that because brain is developing, all the changes taking place during this time. And when people say, okay, guys, but why wouldn't we see this immediately after birth? After birth, there is no brain per se, as a normal brain exists. That's the case because kids are born, let me say, with completely empty. I mean, there are no neural networks, neural connections. So there are several areas in the area of brainstem when we have, let me say, everything will be well established. Because we breathe, let me say, we have heart beating. I mean, things, for example, which are absolutely necessary for us. But at the same time, we're talking about some other areas, starting from kind of midbrain and up. And these areas are responsible for sensory systems. They're responsible for, actually higher neurological activities. And if a normal child is developing, let me say, normal connectivity, and he or she is developing normal, if we have these inflammations, these childs, they're not able to develop regular connections. And connectivity is different. And because of inflammation, let me say, just remember I told you about the number of neurons we have. Some neurons are still viable, some of them, let me say, in reduced conditions. But what is important to say, maybe something scientists would listen to it, because there is, some people say that the brain is big, about 20-30% bigger than normal brain. And initially we see some liquid in many cases, but then we see just big brain, and some people thought it was a kind of edema. But then there was a study saying, okay, guys, it shouldn't be edema because we have, let me say, big number of neurons still being, let's say, in the brain. The number of neurons, let me say, is much bigger than supposed to be by a certain age. In this case, it's, and of course, nobody can answer the question. To say, okay, I know this for sure, of course, I cannot say this, but we shouldn't forget many people who studied inflammation. They know about a certain condition which is called proliferative inflammation or hyperplastic changes. Hyperplasia actually is a situation when we have a big number of same, normal cells, let me say, in certain organs. And hyperplasia can be everywhere. I would call the condition hyperplasia of the brain or certain parts of the brain. This is the case. Guys, if you proceed from this, and start treating infection and inflammation, we will start seeing something already very fast. And many connectivities, I would say, we see in the kids, because it's homeostasis. As soon as we remove this, let me say, we start reconnecting things. We break, let me say, pathological connections. And neurons will start, let me say, creating new connections, and that's what we see. We see they're changing. Clinical changes, just how they see, how they look, how they hear, how some kids who couldn't even walk start riding bicycles. Let me say, it's absolutely impossible for autism, for many autism. And it means it's not just, kind of improvement. All these new skills are the result, let me say, of creating some new, I would say, normal neuronal connections. This is the case. This is maybe just, if at this point, I know we haven't finished, but I can do it anytime this week.
Absolutely, yeah. No, for everybody listening, Dr. Alibek has to cut off at 3. He's got some prior obligations, and we, as always, you and I just ended up talking, and we didn't get through all the questions. We will get through all the questions, and we keep doing episodes, because I think at the very least, at the core of it, at least from what I see, is what I can do, is not being a physician and not being as brilliant as you are, not nearly as brilliant as, not brilliant at all, really, is what I can do is provide a platform. And so I think as long as we keep doing episodes, I don't see how this can result in anything but good, as long as we can push this forward.
Tommy, if I may, it's hard for me to believe that we would get a big university interested. They usually have their own initiatives. I mean, they have their own studies, sciences in certain fields. But whomever is interested, I mean, if I may, I would say through you, guys, if you have a chance to find a doctor, say a professor who understands all things, I would be happy to share all this information, because to me, it's not a matter of, I mean, fame or something like this, because there is no fame.
Sure.
The only thing I need, let me say, I collect it all together, and that's it. I mean, I don't think it's necessary to have a big brain for this.
Yeah, nonsense. Nonsense. You're brilliant.
But I would be happy to share. I mean, this is, in my opinion, if someday some parents, I can talk to some of my patients. They will speak in Russian, but they will have an interpreter. They will tell about the results of treatments.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. I mean, I'll send a text to all this.
Let's do it.
It's an American, podcast, but we'll find somebody who is, trained interpreter, and they would tell, I'll tell, okay, we need to have 20, 30 of this 100, 1,500 to 2,000 people, or whatever number, and you decide to select. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So right now I think there's 5,204 subscribers. So if any of you that are listening, if you know any physicians or professors or doctors of medicine or whatever in any university that would be interested in hearing any of this, at the very least, please send them this episode. I will put the previous episode in the description of part 1. We'll call this part 2. And I don't know who would, but I can email it to past guests I've had on here, doctors and things, and let's get the ball rolling. And this podcast started 18 months ago with me above my parents' garage yelling at a camera. And now it's here with a good camera, good microphone, talking to Dr. Ken Alibek. Baby steps do work. Sometimes it just takes a year and a half to do it. This is episode 502. So little tiny steps, it does build up. So let's get the ball rolling. And maybe in 2023, we'll look back and we'll be like, wow, we had spectacular success. Maybe not. Maybe we'll fail horribly. I don't think we will. I think we'll succeed.
Tommy, I see your future. You're young, let me say, just you understand, how to ask good questions, correct questions. In my opinion, you'd be successful. To me, I'm sorry, I'm using you at this point.
No.
Just using you just to provide, let me say, my message to parents. And actually two messages. One message to parents, another to scientists. And okay, guys, I don't need your money. And it's just the only thing I'd like to do, just to help, and then you talk to other people and tell about your experience. Yeah. That's the only thing I need. Yeah. For the universities, I would be absolutely happy. To speak whatever place. I'm ready to accept any hit. I'm ready for any talk with anybody. The only thing is what kind of audience. It's absolutely fine. And I'm ready to go, let me say, to some other countries, to Canada, to any state, United States, to any university, and would be happy to talk about this.
Well, it's like you said to me in the email before the second episode. You said, ask me questions mercilessly. You said, don't let me prepare. You said, just tear it away. And that's the sign of a confident scientist. And second of all, you said at this point you're using me. Hey, I'm using you too. I'm getting good episodes. You're using me for a platform. It's a symbiosis. It's not a parasite. It's a symbiosis.
Mutual usage.
It's mutual bet. You scratch my back, I scratch yours. I'm getting episodes. You're getting a platform. Hey, it's all good in the neighborhood to me. But I know you got to go. I've kept you for 5 minutes longer. I'll send you an email. We'll set up we'll do another episode. We can aim for next week, and we'll get back to it. And in the meantime, please, anybody that's listening, please comment if you know any physicians or professors who'd be interested. I will do my part and try to email it to people. You do the same for you, and let's get it rolling. It might take a year or two, but let's get the ball rolling, and I think it will work.
Okay, great.
All right, thank you, Dr. Alibek. God bless. God bless America. Stay safe, everybody. And Dr. Alibek, I'll see you. All right, bye-bye.
Recording stopped.